Well, boys and girls, this is my new daily driver. This is a 2003 Porsche 911 Targa, which I picked up from the dealership I used to work at almost 2 years ago. Yes, I've actually been daily driving this car for almost 2 years now. I'm sure you're wondering why it's taken me so long to make a video on it. Well, I think simply because I've just been driving it. You know, it's just become a pretty regular thing. I hop in this thing, take it to school, take it to work, and I've just been plain old enjoying it and haven't really talked about it much on the internet at all. But now, due to this whole coronavirus outbreak thing, a lot of us are laid off, a lot of us aren't going to school right now, like me. Therefore, I have plenty of time to make a video on this car and tell you guys all about it. So, how did I come across this car? Well, kind of by chance, if I'm being honest. So the dealership I worked for a couple years ago, they had a program where any car that would be traded in that was not fit to their requirements would be sent straight to wholesale. Now that can mean a lot of things. Now their requirements were the car had to be 10 years old or newer, it had to have less than 100,000 miles, and it had to be in relatively good shape. Nothing more than minor wear and tear on the body and drivetrain, suspension, chassis components. This car, being a 2003, was past their age limit requirement for a normal trade-in. So they sent it directly to wholesale. Now the catch with wholesale is there's a little bit of an employee incentive to buy wholesale cars at this company. That is, for 2 weeks, any employee would have first dibs on the car for a very reasonable price before it went to auction. So I came across this one day when pulling out a car for a customer, and I was very curious. I had never really gotten up close and personal with a Porsche 911 before, at least one of this generation, one that was, you know, reasonably priced. So I got the keys, took her for a spin, and I absolutely loved the way this thing drove. I mean, the responsiveness of the engine, how the transmission and clutch felt, the steering, the chassis, it just felt amazing. So I had to buy it. I absolutely positively had to buy it. That night, I went to my bank and I picked up a cashier's check, went to work the next day, and I bought the car. And I've been loving it ever since. It's been absolutely fantastic. It's been the most reliable European car I have ever owned. And I've owned, this is my 5th European car and the most expensive one. But as far as the running costs, reliability, and all that sort of stuff with a second-hand exotic sports car like this, I'll be making a separate video on in the future. So if there's any Porsche guys who watch my channel, or Porsche enthusiasts in general, you will know that this is not any ordinary 996. This is the very interesting and very unique Targa model. But it's not like the traditional Targa models like back in the 70s and 80s where you'd have a solid roof panel that would come off and then you'd have a canvas rear. This is all kind of integrated into the car. It's basically a giant sunroof. When we go inside here, I'll show you how it works. One thing you may immediately notice when you go to turn the key on is when you sit down, the ignition cylinder and lock are on the left side of the steering wheel in typical Le Mans fashion. Then slide her on in. Now you're ready to go. So of course when you turn the ignition on, it has a little self-check it does. The first thing it does is it checks the oil level. Normally it doesn't take 46 minutes, but I just ran the car, so therefore it's going to kind of reset its timer until it's been sitting for a while. But as you can see, you have a very nice, very cozy cockpit. It's black on black, which is definitely hard to clean, but when it is clean, it looks absolutely excellent. When you sit in the seats, I know it's very hard to explain a feeling of a seat when you're obviously not in the car, but it feels very supportive. I have tons of thigh support here on the bottom of the seat. Lumbar support is excellent, and despite how kind of unexciting the seats look, they actually have a lot of really nice bolsterings on the sides here, which really keep you in on the turns. You feel very connected, very planted. The distance from your hands to the steering wheel is perfect. As far as the shifter goes, you do not have to overextend your arm like a lot of European cars. The height of the shifter is excellent, to where if your elbow is sitting down on the armrest here, it comes right into hand. And of course, one thing that's very interesting that I did not realize at first, now the pedals. The whole pedal set is offset to the right a little more, you know, at least compared to a BMW or a Japanese car. So it kind of takes a little bit of getting used to. When you first put your clutch on it, you might slip off for a second there, so it's definitely something to get used to, but I never mesh my 2 feet together. I never end up hitting 2 pedals with 1 foot. It all works perfectly fine. Now on to the main reason why I got in this car, to show you how the Targa works. So of course, the system does use a lot of battery, so foot on the clutch, we'll go ahead and fire her up. Whoops, actually. Foot on the clutch. Fires up and idles. Then your Targa controls are down here at the bottom. You have the button here, which is for your shade. Obviously it's a big piece of glass. If it was just straight up a piece of glass, the interior would be absolutely baking. So you hit this button here, you have the shade that comes back. Retracts all the way into the frame there. Then of course, the cherry on the top, the actual mechanism itself, is controlled by the switch here on the left. Hit that button, the glass retracts, and after about 5 to 8 seconds, it retracts about 3/4 of the way back into the rear compartment here. Now you have a very large, vast, open space to enjoy wind. You also have a little flap here which deflects against buffeting, and there is absolutely zero buffeting whatsoever. Wind noise is very minimal, and turbulence is very minimal as well, even with both windows down. And of course you have all the other basic necessities here. You have your little mirror with a sliding deal, the sliding cover. Down here you have your ashtray, your 2 window controls, which are 1 touch. If you press and hold, it'll go down until as long as you take your finger off. However, if you do 1 quick press, they go down all the rest of the way. And same thing with going back up. Hold it down, and it goes up as long as you hold the button down for. But 1 quick little tap, goes up all the rest of the way. Definitely interesting. Of course, here in the middle, it's got an aftermarket head unit here. It's this Pioneer Mixtrax, as it's called. It's nice, you know, it kind of fits in. Typically what they have to do is the climate controls on the non-navigation models are actually up in the center here, and then you get a relocation kit to put it down here to make for a large screen. Of course, it's got Bluetooth and all the other fancy whistles and bells, so I can talk with my phone. When someone calls me, this call pops up on the screen, hit accept, and you're talking. And of course there are some options to be had here. Some of these come with rear wipers and a couple other little things. Obviously this is a Targa, so that's not going to have a rear wiper, but I'll explain why later. You have your traction control, central locking system, and rear defroster. Of course you have your cigarette lighter for your cigarette lighter, or in my case your radar detector, which is definitely important. Then you have a dial here for the speed at which your intermittent wipers move. Moving over to the left, you have your fog lights, parking lights, and regular beams as you would any other vehicle basically. You have some selector stocks here. You have your cruise controls, you have your infotainment system, which if I manipulate this, I can kind of scroll through some functions here, some basic settings, statistics of the vehicle, so on and so forth. And as you can see, we're just shy of 128,000 miles. I bought it with 118,000 miles. And then of course you have your lights and indicators. And the steering wheel is adjustable as well. You have this here on the stock. Of course, what's nice, what I like actually, are these extra compartments inside the door here. You get a nice deep area to store whatever you want, and that's on both sides of the car. And here I have a scanner, for example, and as you can see, something this big fits in there perfectly fine. Actually no, this is my radar detector, not my scanner, but yeah, you get the point. And there's still some space to have. And probably one of my favorite features about this car is the electronic spoiler. It's definitely incognito, but there's a button right down here at the bottom of the fuse panel that actually controls the electronic spoiler deploying and redeploying. It also does it automatically. When the vehicle goes over 70 miles an hour or so, the spoiler will automatically come up and deploy, When you return down below 35 miles an hour, it'll retract automatically. However, you can also control the spoiler manually. Obviously, pressing it up here will raise the spoiler. And hitting it down below here will lower it, and you can do that anytime you want and flex on people. Otherwise, it'll just operate automatically. Of course, you have your locking glove center console compartment here. And I have a sunglasses case here, some other various things that you would need in daily driving a vehicle. You have a little coin slot here, which is kind of strange. I wouldn't recommend using it. It doesn't really seem like it's that reliable. It seems like a lot of coins would fall out of this thing, but hey, if you want to, that is there. And of course, your normal glove compartment, which, you know, it's got a decent amount of space for what it is. Not bad whatsoever. Close it up and lock it if you have to. Oh, and of course, before we hop out, your mirror controls are right here up on the left. So now, being that the car is rear-engined, the trunk is in the front. So come in here and it opens up like any regular hood does. Reach in for the latch and boom. This is your main cargo compartment, which is not that bad. You can fit 2 carry-on bags in here. Of course, I have the full spare tire kit, upgraded amp for the audio system, which came with the car. And a little compartment here for some oil, because when you drive these things hard, they do tend to burn a little more oil, which is fine. It is designed to do that. It is well lubricated. Yeah, so we'll close her up. And then we'll head to the back and I'll show you what there is to see as far as the engine goes, which is not much because it is in there. All right. It is a little wet in here since I did wash the car recently, but this is what you see. You see the air intake, alternator, water pump, and a couple of other little things. But this is a 3.6 liter flat 6 dual overhead cam engine. Makes 316 horsepower and 278 pound-feet of torque. If you want to change the spark plugs, you need to get underneath the car, as well as most other things. You can do other stuff. Like, for example, I actually had to change this oil filler tube, which cracked right at the seam. That was relatively okay. I had to take the alternator off, a couple bolts there in the back, and it slides out. Not too terrible, not too bad at all. But, you know, you can check all your fluids and do some minor repairs, but that's pretty much all you can do from the engine compartment here. Everything else is underneath. Another option this car has are the 18-inch Star 5-spoke wheels. They have 225/40s in the front, and in the back we have much thicker 285/30s. And of course, front and rear you have ventilated discs with 4-piston calipers. You're probably wondering what kind of repairs and maintenance have I done to this car so far? Well, I'll be covering that in a different video, but as far as modifications goes, the only thing I have done, which is going to be hard to see, but it is a high flow X pipe. So if you can see underneath here, I have a Top Gear X pipe with 200 cell cats. Now basically I did that just because I kind of wanted the more racy, high-pitched flat 6 sound. The original cats were perfectly fine, but I kind of wanted to pepper up just a little bit, nothing over the top. And that is really the only modification I've done to the car. The factory exhaust system in terms of the tips and the mufflers are made by IMSB, which is typically, for all the Euro guys out there, that is a performance exhaust manufacturer. They make a lot of muffler delete kits and headers for things like for cars like BMW M3s and so on and so forth. So I would only assume that they flow pretty well from the factory. Who knows, I may upgrade to better flowing mufflers in the future for more sound, but for now, I'm pretty content with how it is. Since we're on the topic of engines and such, I might as well also tell you that if you haven't noticed already, it's a 6-speed Getrag manual transmission with very close ratios, mind you. Performance of the car in terms of its straight line capabilities, it'll do 0 to 60 in 4.8 seconds with a quarter-mile time of 13.4 at, well, I forget the mile an hour, but I think it was close to 100, and has a top speed of 177, which for 316 horsepower in a car that weighs 3,100 pounds, I would say that's pretty good. Probably because there's really no drivetrain loss since the engine is directly over the drive wheel. It's kind of like a front wheel drive car in a way, but obviously in the back. And from the outside here, you can have a better view of the whole Targa assembly. As you can see, the actual piece of glass has come down and gone into the back of the compartment there. So now that I have the Targa top back up, I'll go ahead and show you the other interesting feature about the Targa models, the hatchback, which is, as described, a liftback or hatchback, hydraulically supported. So this way, I wouldn't obviously recommend it because you have all this body here, but you can put some bags back here, you can put some small pieces of luggage, and if you do fold the seats down, if you're not traveling with anybody, you do have a decent amount of volume to store stuff back here. It's pretty interesting. You also have a couple speakers as well, way in the corner here, as well as back there for the poor bastards who you have stuffed in the back of this thing. Then when you close it, let's say you have your hands full and you don't close this thing all the way. If you lightly tap it, it sucks itself in and latches itself. This is not moving back up, which is pretty nice, pretty convenient, especially since you typically would have to reach all the way over to the car to pull something out. Don't want to have to really deal with trying to slam it closed or anything like that. So I think that's a pretty cool feature. Alrighty, boys and girls, well, there you have it. This is my secondhand daily driver Porsche 911 Targa. If I didn't mention it before, I got this for a very reasonable $12,500 plus a couple of shitty fees here and there, which I don't account because that's the government, that's not the price of the vehicle. Well, and I think that just about wraps up this overview of my Porsche 911. So if you guys like this video, feel free to give me a thumbs up. Feel free to subscribe if you want to see more on it. And until then, I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.